Well, hello lovely people, and welcome back to Fixing Rusty Stuff, where the fun never starts and the work never ends. I have about as much knowledge as a baked potato, so please don't copy the madness in these videos. It has been said before by many a perspicacious and probably exasperated man that I seem to have a proclivity for turning rusty old shit into slightly less rusty old shit. So I hope all 115 of you rust-loving warriors are into the glamorous rag and bone world of upcycling, or as I like to call it, making rusty old shit new again. Because this week I'm going to dive head first into a pile of useless rusty old shit and attempt to transform it into something slightly more useful to adorn the man cave. I've got a feeling this episode is going to need a counter. Question: are you familiar with the saying, you can't polish a turd but you can roll it in glitter? Well, this is going to be like rolling a turd in, well, another turd. An example of me trying to polish turds is this antique blowtorch. I purchased this during an impromptu visit to an antiques fair along with various other rusty pieces of shit that should probably have been left where they were. In this case, I polished it up with my now broken Dremel. I threaded some 3-core cable through its innards and strapped on an Edison lamp holder. Once I threw in a quite frankly massive lamp, reminiscent of an illuminated breast implant, I had the world's most impractical lamp. Who said I don't have imagination? Among the antiques fair haul, a set of hubcaps, minus the car, a rusty old oil can, yep, they saw me coming a mile off, an old French railway light, pardon moi mon chéri, a Cadillac fog light, well, anything Cadillac related's got to be worth a punt, surely. And a random industrial factory light that's probably seen more action than a hooker on a warship. Now, instead of thinking why would this idiot actually spend money on that crap, try to think of all the time and effort that's gone into making these rusty old artefacts. That's gone into making all this rusty old shit, just to get thrown away the moment it's infected with a minor touch of the red plague. Well, that's the throwaway world we live in, but not on my watch. Let's see if we can salvage some of these pieces and extend their life for, well, probably a week or two at best. You may have been able to notice in my previous bodges, link in the description of course, that I have numerous cables protruding from the walls of the cave. This is not because the man cave vomited its wiring out in disgust at the workmanship, although I wouldn't be surprised if it did. Nah, these are for the external lights. Buying new lights is far too easy and lacks that uncertain, dangerous trepidation I do so enjoy. So I took the dubious decision of attempting to bodge together a couple of luminaires using the rusty old shit I stupidly departed with my hard-earned cash for at aforementioned antiques fair. Yes, you heard me right. Rusty old shit into functional yet questionable and probably dangerous decor. I'm not sure there's much to work with here except the hubcaps, so let's take a look at them. I can't remember how much I paid, but I'm sure it was far too much. Firstly, and unsurprisingly, they're covered in shit. Not sure if the previous owner's favourite hobby was driving through a turd factory, but they definitely need a clean up. Also, the chrome seems to be having a battle with the rust and it looks like it needs reinforcements because the rust is winning. Stamped into the centre of these beauties is the name Armstrong Siddeley. Now, this is not the love child of the first man on the moon and his favourite mistress.
Houston, we have a problem.
This is a British luxury car manufacturer from the first half of the last century. Despite having no apparent affiliation with Egypt, it's got a sphinx in the logo. God knows, and nobody cares, why. Their cars were so good and apparently unprofitable that in 1960 they gave up the luxury automobile business and went into making plane parts instead. Here's a little gem I found on the interwebs. It's a 1955 Armstrong Siddeley Sapphire 346. The 346 refers to the amount of miles it can do before it has a breakdown. Available for 11,000 of the King's finest English pounds, they even include the hubcaps. Speaking of which, I think I've seen those beauties somewhere before. Well, it's 70 years old, I guess I can't moan about a bit of surface rust now, can I? Side note on the rusty stuff. There are plenty of ways to clean off your rusty old shit, and depending on how much you want to damage the shit underneath the old rust, you can select your weapon of choice. You can drown it in vinegar or some other toxic concoction that'll have you shitting your own soul out if you accidentally swallow it. Sanding works. Grinding it off is an option. You can use a Dremel if it ain't broken. Abrasive wheels, yep, they're great. Wire brushes, sure. You can even hammer it off. Okay, that was bollocks, you can't hammer it off. But for the hardcore rustbusters out there, you could go all CIA mad scientists and waterboard your rusty shit in an electrolyte bath, zap it with some current, and let the electricity do the heavy lifting all by itself. The other option is rechroming, but seeing as I don't have a rechroming lab in the cave, I'm going for the next best thing, vinegar and tinfoil. After giving them a squirt of vinegar, I began furiously rubbing the hubcaps with the tinfoil, like an upcycling Aladdin trying to summon a rust-based motoring genie. I told you already, Fixin'. No more sex robots. If you're wondering why I'm using tinfoil to scrub rusty chrome, fair question. You can pause the video right here to Google it. Just kidding, this is why. Pause now to read. For those who don't give a rusty old shit, let's continue. I gave the hubcaps a nice soapy bath. The dirt and surface rust came off pretty well, but the areas where rust had taken over were permanent imperfections. Sorry, I mean designer patination. I gave it a rub down on my own bodged polishing wheel, built using questionable methods and very little sobriety, and unsurprisingly, the shine factor wasn't much improved. But here's a satisfying before and after comparison. I mean, it's not the same hubcap, and it's not that satisfying, but hey ho, you get it anyway. Before we dive deeper into the madness, let's see what we got in this box. A pair of decorative Edison E27 lamps. Yes, they're called lamps, not bulbs, lovely people. Bulbs grow in the garden. A lovely assortment of washers and extra small nuts. Insert joke here. Two rather confusingly named swan neck arms. To go with the duck leg teeth, if we're just naming animals and body parts here. Threaded, M10 size. Chrome ceiling plates with 10mm hole. Yeah, you see where I'm going with this, don't you? And lastly, two Edison E27 lamp holders to match the lamps. Don't get too excited though, let's put them back in the box for now, we'll play with those later. After checking all the components, I employed the trusty guess and hope method to mark a spot as close to the centre as possible. Lacking a drill press, I grabbed my Makita. Now after this next bit, there'd be no turning back. I didn't want to ruin these hubcaps and I was nervous. It's a bit like how I felt the night before I married my ex-wife. I calmed myself down, stayed loyal to the sacred way of the bodge, and estimated my way through the drilling process too. Precision? Optional. Confidence? Abundant. After repeating the cleaning process, I had two shiny-ish but charmingly patinated hubcaps with 10mm holes in them. And now, time for a very brief intermission and a video of HV switchgear being activated remotely.
Okay, I'm very close now, huh? Keep closing.
Back to the rusty shit. Next up, assembly. It's pretty straightforward, probably wrong, but straightforward nonetheless. I took the swan neck arm, casually tossed on a washer and nut, and bolted it onto the ceiling plate. Then I bolted that whole bodge-tastic assembly onto the hubcap. Now there was not much thread to play with on this end of the swan neck. In fact, there's more length on the hair of a gnat's bollocks, but I just about managed to get a nut on there with enough thread left over to slap on the hubcap on the E27 lamp holder. I use 1.5mm singles to wire these antique death traps, but if you're feeling really rebellious you could reduce the cross-sectional area of the cable, or as I like to call it, the cable girth. After heat shrinking I gave it a cheeky pokey through the hole, and once I've fished it out the other side, it's ready for terminations and lamp holder assembly. Lovely. At least I thought it was. Have a look at this thing, it's bloody tiny. What was I thinking? I've got to fit 3 two-way connectors in one and 3 three-way connectors in the other. Even if I use the world's tiniest connector blocks, there's no way it's all squeezing in there. Let's reassess our options here. A bigger ceiling plate should at least provide a bit more room to shoehorn some kind of connectors in there. Okay, that gives us a fighting chance. Ideally we'll use waterproof connectors because, well, not dying is always a good plan. So traditional connector blocks are out. After much digging I found these bad boys on Toolstation's website, but it turns out the information listed on their website is a load of old bollocks. So the website lists 16mm as the height, the box lists 19mm as the height, and I measure 22mm as the height. I'm pretty sure they just threw darts at random numbers on the wall when deciding what to list as product dimensions. The difference between what I ordered and what I got, like the difference between an iPhone and a toaster. Nah, that ain't gonna work. Toolstation, more like Full Station. This is why we prefer Screwfix. As you can see, the depth of the ceiling plate is 19mm, so we need a connector no taller than about 18mm. It gives us 1mm of wiggle room. The only waterproof connectors that might fit were these Waggo offerings from Screwfix, but at 27 quid for two? Bloody hell, I reckon I could talk myself into using non-IP rated Waggo lever connectors for a fraction of that price. After a deep philosophical debate over what's worth more, my life or 27 quid, I decided to go for the classic compromise. Cheap Waggo connectors and a home bodged IP test. Now if you're wondering what a home bodged IP test involves, it's simple. You throw water at the light fitting like you're baptising a reluctant cat and pray the connectors stay dry. What could possibly go wrong? Alright, time to terminate these cables into the lamp holder. Strip the cable ends, more pokey into the terminals. Whip out your trusty manual screw rotator to tighten them up. The lamp holders have earth connections, which is highly important. I could bore you with the gritty details of earth fault current paths, but to save your sanity, let's just say if the earth cable isn't connected to the metal parts of the light fitting, your hair might end up spikier than a hedgehog's arsehole. How do we check? With a multi-function tester, of course. Okay, so one probe on the earth cable and one probe on the metal shade. We're testing for electrical resistance here, and we're after 0 ohms for a perfect reading. It means we're slightly less likely to die of electrocution. Now for the ceiling plate. And just for shits and giggles, let's check the swan's neck. Lovely. Okay, so now we've proved the lights are at least partly safe, let's get these mismatched connectors in place. Hey, you got to work with what you've got. Time to get these vintage fire hazards up on the wall. First, I attach the mounting bracket using my electrical screw rotator. I'm only screwing these lights into the cladding, so fingers crossed that's enough to keep them up longer than a cokehead on a free sesh. Strip the cables. Throw them into the connectors and hit them with a bit of lefty loosey, righty tighty, a Robert's your uncle, Fanny's your dad's sister, they're up. Screw in the lamps, and now for the moment of truth. Fixing said let there be light, and behold, there was light. Lovely. Now it's time for the much anticipated home bodged IP test. What do these readings tell us? That the lights are dry as a camel's nutsack. Lovely. Cue some scenic shots of my bodge-tastic creation with some chill music overlaid. Let's all take a moment to appreciate the functional chaos. Alright lovely people, the moment you've all been waiting for. That's right, it's time for this week's run-based errors. In at number 1 we have a missing decorative nut for the left light. I've searched the cave about 3 times, even had a half-hearted tidy up, but it disappeared faster than my will to work on a Friday afternoon. Luckily, I had a standard M5 nut to stand in as a replacement, but the search does continue. RBE number 2 brings us a design flaw. I forgot to account for these ridges, which are probably going to make water pooling the light fitting. So these lights are highly likely to divert back to their former rusty selves faster than you can say Armstrong Sidley. I could drill a hole to let the water drain away, but who wants practical decor? Now we've reached the end of this bodgeathon, let's take a look at our leaderboard. In at number 1 with 17 mentions we have Rusty. Shit takes the number 2 spot, pun not intended, with 14. And third place with 13 mentions we have Old. If you guessed Rusty as the winner, well done. You've won an all-inclusive trip to nowhere with your favourite imaginary friend. Welcome Padres, I hope you've enjoyed the madness. This brings us to the end of another episode. Thanks for watching. If you found that mildly entertaining, illuminate that like button, switch on a subscription, share it with your favourite hubcap genie. I'm not giving you any more sex robots. And stay tuned for the next instalment of Fixing Rusty Stuff.